News at 3 minutes after 6 this morning. A Metairie woman was killed this morning in a car accident in the 1800 block of Moss Street. Reports say a driver going at a high rate of speed drove into Bayou St. John around 2 o'clock this morning. The driver got out, but the woman didn't make it. Crews pulled the car out about a half hour ago. The woman's body was still inside. The car went about 50 feet into the water. We'll have more information on this accident as it becomes available. Authorities say the driver, who has been identified as Chris Neighbors, will be charged with vehicular negligent homicide. We do not have an identity for the woman who was killed.
Getting a car out of Bayou St. John this morning, police say the driver, Chris Neighbors, was speeding when he drove his car into the bayou around 2 o'clock this morning. Neighbors got out, but a Metairie woman whose name is being withheld did not. The woman's body was still inside the car when crews pulled it out of the water about an hour ago. There's no word yet on the condition of the driver, but police say Neighbors will be charged with vehicular negligent homicide.
This morning, when the car she was riding in plunged into Bayou St. John. The victim is identified as 25-year-old Michelle Hainsel. Police say 30-year-old Christopher Neighbors of New Orleans was driving the car. He was able to swim to safety. Neighbors could face negligent homicide charges.
An Orleans Parish jury has convicted a local doctor in connection with a fatal car wreck. The accident happened last February when Dr. Christopher Neighbors drove his car into Bayou St. John. Neighbors swam to safety, but his passenger, Michelle Hainsel, was killed. Neighbors was drunk at the time of the accident, and today a jury found him guilty of vehicular homicide. Sentencing is set for February 15th.
Well, a New Orleans doctor will spend the next several years of his life in jail. Dr. Christopher Neighbors has been sentenced to 15 years for vehicular homicide. About a year ago, he drove his car into Bayou St. John, and his passenger, 25-year-old Shelley Hansel, drowned. Dr. Neighbors admits he got drunk at a carnival parade last February and was speeding down Wisner Boulevard. Today, he got the maximum sentence, but with good time, he could be out in 7.5 years.
The car that plunged into Bayou St. John. News 8's Dion Floyd has the story.
Somebody's been putting flowers. With support from Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, 25-year-old Shelley Hansel's family places a cross at Bayou St. John where she drowned in a car.
Trying to put it in front.
Cookie Hansel, clutching a small box containing her daughter's ashes, blames her death on the man who was driving the vehicle, a New Orleans surgeon.
My daughter probably rejected him in some fashion or told him no, and this was his way of getting back at her. I do believe that, honestly. Something had to lead to the incident, the car accident, the driving fast in the park. I believe he killed her right out.
A quick look here at 31-year-old Dr. Christopher Neighbors, following a judge's order that he serve 15 years in prison. The court case revealed both had been drinking that February 1995 night when the car plunged into the bayou. The doctor freed himself, but never told emergency workers the woman was trapped inside the car. Another revelation, his blood alcohol test taken at Charity Hospital, the place where he worked, was tampered with.
I think that that's a slap in the face to the judicial system to come in here and say that excuse my actions and my personality merely because I'm a medical doctor. It has nothing to do with that. And the court recognized that he was an arrogant and cocky person, not an arrogant and cocky doctor. And that's what he's being penalized for.
The judge in the case says this vehicle purchased by the defendant after the drowning with the word splash featured on the paint job shows Dr. Neighbors is insensitive and self-centered. Neighbors' attorney disagrees.
We will certainly appeal the sentence. We expressed to the judge today that we did not intend to appeal the conviction because we accept guilt. But 15 years is truly absurd.
Attorneys point out this section of the bayou where Shelley Hansel died is 12 feet deep at most. And what's ironic is her mother says Shelley was an avid swimmer and had been a lifeguard for years.
I saw pictures of my child. I know she tried to get out of that car. She was trying to slide through that seatbelt. She was aware of what was happening to her. She probably lived 3 to 10 minutes after the accident. I want to thank our family and friends for seeing us through.
At Bayou St. John, the Hansel family says a prayer and feels finally they can put Shelley to rest. Reporting from Bayou St. John, Dion Floyd, News 8.
Former doctor at Charity Hospital has been sentenced to the maximum penalty in the death of a local woman. Dr. Chris Neighbors was convicted a few months ago of vehicular homicide in an accident last year which killed 25-year-old Michelle Hansel. Today, the doctor was sentenced to 15 years in prison with no chance for probation or parole. In court this morning, Dr. Neighbors admitted that he was indeed drunk when his car ran off the road into Bayou St. John.
This is Louisiana's news leader, Channel 4's Eyewitness News.
A local doctor receives the maximum penalty for the drunk driving death of his passenger.
Good evening. A local doctor will pay the maximum penalty for driving drunk into Bayou St. John last February.
His passenger has already paid the ultimate price, her life. And as Karen Swenson reports, there are aspects surrounding the case which may lead to further criminal charges.
25-year-old Shelley Hansel was a champion swimmer, a lifeguard who drowned inside a car on the bottom of Bayou St. John. She was trapped in a seatbelt while the doctor she was with escaped through a sunroof and then hesitated to call for help. Today, the former charity oral surgeon, Chris Neighbors, was sentenced to the maximum 15 years in prison for vehicular homicide.
I saw pictures of my child. I know she tried to get out of that car. She was trying to slide through that seatbelt. She was aware of what was happening to her. She probably lived 3 to 10 minutes after the accident. If someone would have been able to help her, but no one knew she was there. Mr. Neighbors kept everyone from knowing that she was in the water, did nothing to save her.
Today, the doctor took the blame, breaking down in tears on the stand. He said, "I agree with Mrs. Hansel that I'm completely responsible. I don't know how I did it, but I know it was my fault. I was an idiot. I was irresponsible. It was my fault."
That's the only remorse he showed in courtroom, was to save himself. Not for my daughter, not for the life that he took.
Even the judge cited examples of Neighbors' bad attitude. Just hours before the accident at Parkway Tavern, Neighbors threatened a cop trying to stop him from fighting. Neighbors admits he said, "If you throw me out of here, you better hope you never come to charity." And then there was the truck he bought after the accident with a decal marked Splash on it. His friend said he didn't mean anything by it, and they testified as to what a caring person he is. But the judge didn't buy it.
What the court took into consideration was everything that happened that night and all the facts that happened that night, and really focused on it. And obviously the court felt that that was the appropriate sentence.
Sandra Hansel clings to her daughter's ashes in a rosary. Today, she says, she will put her child to rest. But another case is just unfolding.
Neighbors admitted today that he is an alcoholic, and he said that on the night of the accident, he'd been drinking very heavily. But when his blood alcohol content was measured here at Charity Hospital that night, it came out at only 0.04. And even the defense admitted the sample had been contaminated. And earlier during the trial, EMS technicians testified it was the only case they could remember where they weren't allowed to remain present in the room when the test was taken. The DA's office has launched an investigation of possible obstruction of justice at Charity Hospital. Karen Swenson, Channel 4 Eyewitness News.
A spokesman for Charity says they regret the tragic death of Shelley Hansel, but they won't comment on the blood test of Chris Neighbors. As for Neighbors' family, they say the judge ignored Chris's remorseful statements and testimony of friends who backed him up. They say the sentence is extreme for a first-time offense, and they're consulting their lawyer about a possible appeal.
From ABC 26 News.
An Orleans Parish judge is deciding if 2 hospitals covered up for a former doctor involved in a drunk driving death.
Christopher Neighbors drove his car into Bayou St. John, killing Michelle Hansel. Hansel's family believes doctors at Charity tried to hide the fact that Neighbors was drunk. ABC 26's Tom Bagwell is in the newsroom now with the latest. Tom.
Liz, Hansel's mother and father say they were crushed when they lost their daughter in 1995. Today they testified they were devastated again when they found blood samples taken at Charity the morning of the incident may have been tampered with. This is the car Chris Neighbors and Shelley Hansel were in that February night when it ran a stop sign at Wisner and Fredericks and plunged into a freezing cold Bayou St. John. At his sentencing, Neighbors testified he got out through the sunroof. Hansel never made it out of her seatbelt. Today, Teresa Lamb said when she checked Neighbors' blood at the NOPD crime lab, it tested .04, but she said it looked thinner and brighter than most specimens. A second test showed the actual blood count dangerously low. At one point, she wondered if the donor was dead. That's when police brought the blood back to Charity. Dr. Monroe Samuels had the blood tested a third time. Today he testified, quote, that sample of blood was diluted.
Of course it's possible, but when and how and who, I don't know.
He said he'd never seen a sample like it. The Hansels believe personnel at Charity tried to cover for their colleague. Dr. Jean Friday admits some of the tests she ordered never got done, but she thinks conspiracy is too strong a word.
This is Charity Hospital. Tests got not done a lot.
Shelley's mom, Cookie, says she has to live every day with not knowing what really happened. She says that's worse than knowing the truth. Shelley's father says he won't rest until justice is served.
If somebody would even come tell me we're sorry it happened, it should have never happened and it won't happen again. They've never owned up to that, and that's bad.
At his criminal trial in 1996, Neighbors was sentenced to 15 years, the maximum. With good time, he is scheduled to be released March 20th, next month. Live in the newsroom, Tom Bagwell, ABC 26 News.
Thanks, Tom. There was no comment today. The attorneys representing Charity and the LSU representing Charity and the LSU Medical Center would not release a comment, and no word when the judge will rule. We'll be right back after this.
This is Eyewitness News 4 at 10.
He drove his car into the water, leaving a woman still strapped in her seatbelt to die.
He was a medical student. Now Eyewitness News 4 uncovers that man was one step away from being a doctor at an Albuquerque hospital until he was found out. Nicole Brady is live at UNM Hospital with tonight's top story. Nicole.
Well, Tom and Carla, officials here at UNMH say they did conditionally admit 39-year-old Christopher Neighbors. The state then went ahead and granted him a residency license. But after doing a more thorough background check on Neighbors, UNMH changed its mind. This is a piece of Christopher Neighbors' past that came back to haunt him. His car being pulled out of a bayou in New Orleans on a rainy night in 1995. He made it out, but still strapped in her seat was Sandra Hansel's 25-year-old daughter, Michelle. At the time, Neighbors was a Louisiana State medical student. After the accident, Neighbors reportedly told police, quote, I don't know the bitch's name, I just picked her up at a bar. He also purchased a truck with the word splash on the back, something that didn't amuse the judge who sentenced him to 15 years for vehicular homicide. But last year, Neighbors was paroled. That's when he decided to pick up his medical career in New Mexico. In September this year, the state's medical board granted Neighbors a residency license. With that license, Neighbors was conditionally admitted to the family practice program at UNMH. UNMH officials say after a background check, however, they rejected Neighbors because of his felony conviction. They say he was never on the payroll and that he never saw a single patient. However, Neighbors' picture still appears on the hospital's website, and UNMH says he may be trying to appeal their decision. State law makes it possible for convicted felons to get medical and other types of licenses. A medical board spokesperson says there's often pressure on the board to grant such licenses because of the doctor shortage in New Mexico. It's not uncommon also for doctors with criminal backgrounds to seek licenses. Last year, 5 out of 21 applicants successfully obtained some kind of a license. Reporting live at UNMH, Nicole Brady, Eyewitness News 4.
Nicole, thank you.
State News at 9.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Darrell Green. The father of a woman who drowned in Bayou St. John 10 years ago is still speaking out on her behalf. The drunk driver, convicted of killing his 25-year-old daughter, recently tried to enter a medical residency program. That story is first on Fox tonight. Summer Jackson has more.
Well, Darrell, Christopher Neighbors was a medical student when he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for vehicular homicide. He served 7 years in prison and was released in March 2003 with good time reductions. But that early morning crash at the bayou is still impacting him today.
With closure brings something to an end, and I don't know how you end it.
Not a day goes by that William Hensel doesn't think of his eldest daughter, Michelle. She was killed 10 years ago in Bayou St. John by a drunk driver, Christopher Neighbors. Hensel says daily it's a healing process for his family.
You know, we don't walk around with it on our sleeves, so to speak, but it's you know, not too far below the surface, I guess. We've had to learn how to relive our lives. My family was destroyed.
Police say Neighbors had just met Michelle Hansel and was driving drunk when he crashed his sports car in February 1995. Hansel says Christopher Neighbors' car was speeding down that street coming out of City Park. He hit a curb and then landed in Bayou St. John. He says police were on the scene immediately, but his daughter was trapped by a shoulder belt in the car. But Neighbors was able to swim to safety.
He offered no assistance to my daughter to get out of his vehicle. For whatever reason, didn't want to tell the police and the rescue people that were on site almost immediately after this car went to the bayou that there was a person in the car.
When William Hensel saw on the internet that Neighbors was trying to become a medical resident at the University of New Mexico, he reacted. In October, he sent the university newspaper clippings about his daughter's murder at the bayou.
I'm not chasing somebody or dogging somebody or doing things like that. It seems like some individuals that I've talked to think that's what I've been doing, and that's not the case. Just getting the information out there.
Now Neighbors, who has a dental degree, has withdrawn from a position in the University of New Mexico's medical residency program. Neighbors' attorney says he withdrew because he was told he wouldn't be hired. University officials said it doesn't speak good for the university, and there were other fine candidates. Hansel says he never asked the university to do anything.
It's the issue of being a medical doctor that's disturbing.
Hansel says Neighbors' sentence is supposed to end in December 2010. He says he doesn't know what will happen after that.
This will be with us for the rest of our lives. We're not going to go on and say, oh, it didn't happen.
Now, Michelle Hensel's father says at the time of her death, she was a semester from graduating college. He believes she would have gone on to be a writer. Daryl, and I also want to stress that he was not convicted of murder, but vehicular homicide.
Summer Jackson, thank you very much.